Ladies and gentlemen,
Sheikh Hasina Wajid, born into a family eternally etched in Bangladesh's history, was destined for a life intertwined with her nation's fate. Her father, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, revered as the father of the nation, led Bangladesh to independence in 1971. This legacy cast a long shadow, shaping Hasina's destiny and propelling her into the heart of Bangladeshi politics. From a young age, Hasina witnessed the tumultuous birth of her nation and the sacrifices demanded for its freedom. The assassination of her father, along with most of her family, in 1975, was a defining moment. It instilled in her a profound sense of duty to uphold her father's vision and serve the people of Bangladesh. She faced persecution, exile, and numerous attempts on her life. Yet, she remained undeterred, emerging as a symbol of hope and resistance against authoritarian rule. Her journey, however, was far from simple. Sheikh Hasina's rise to power was marked by both triumph and tragedy. She returned to Bangladesh from exile in 1981, assuming leadership of the Awami League, the party founded by her father. Her charisma and powerful appeal to her father's legacy resonated with the masses. She faced house arrest, survived multiple assassination attempts, and witnessed the brutal suppression of political dissent. In 1996, after 2 decades of struggle, Hasina and the Awami League swept to victory in the general elections. She became the first female Prime Minister of Bangladesh, ushering in a new era of hope and possibility. Hasina's first term saw significant strides in rural development, women's empowerment, and regional cooperation. However, her tenure was also marked by accusations of corruption and an increasingly authoritarian style of leadership. Sheikh Hasina's return to power in 2009 marked the beginning of an unprecedented period of dominance for her and the Awami League. Her government embarked on ambitious infrastructure projects, oversaw impressive economic growth, and made significant progress in areas like poverty reduction and healthcare. However, alongside these achievements, a darker side to her rule began to emerge. Accusations of corruption, cronyism, and the suppression of dissent grew louder. Opposition parties and human rights groups accused her government of manipulating the electoral system and cracking down on free speech. The disappearance of prominent journalist Shafiqul Islam Kajol in 2020 further fueled international concern about the shrinking space for dissent in Bangladesh. Despite repeated denials by the government, the incident cast a pall over Hasina's human rights record. In 2018, a simmering discontent among Bangladesh's youth erupted into a nationwide protest movement. The trigger was a controversial government policy, the quota system for public sector jobs. Many saw it as a tool for political patronage and a symbol of entrenched inequality. The protests, spearheaded by students, were fueled by a deep-seated anger at what they perceived as a lack of equal opportunities and rampant corruption. The demonstrations, largely peaceful initially, were met with a brutal crackdown by security forces. Images of students being beaten, tear-gassed, and arrested flooded social media, sparking outrage and drawing international condemnation. The government's response only served to further inflame the protests and galvanize support for the movement. The quota system unrest exposed the deep fault lines within Bangladeshi society. As the quota system protests grew, so did the government's crackdown. Security forces were given a free hand to quell the unrest, often resorting to excessive force and brutality. Hundreds of students were arrested, many on dubious charges, and reports of torture in custody became widespread. The government's attempts to control the narrative extended beyond the streets. Access to social media platforms was restricted, independent news websites were blocked, and journalists critical of the government faced harassment. The international community watched with growing concern as the situation in Bangladesh deteriorated. Human rights organizations condemned the government's crackdown on protesters and called for restraint. The United Nations expressed concern over the violence and urged all parties to engage in dialogue. The government, however, remained defiant, dismissing international criticism as interference in its internal affairs. The international community's response to the events unfolding in Bangladesh was swift and unequivocal. Governments, human rights organizations, and international media outlets condemned the government's crackdown on the protests. The United States expressed deep concern over the violence and urged the government to respect freedom of expression and peaceful assembly. The European Union called for an independent investigation into the allegations of human rights abuses. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and other organizations documented widespread human rights violations during the protests. Their reports painted a grim picture of a government resorting to increasingly repressive measures to silence dissent. The international pressure, however, seemed to have little impact on Hasina's government. It dismissed the criticism as biased and politically motivated. The quota system protests and their brutal suppression left a deep scar on Bangladeshi society. The country found itself increasingly polarized, with deep divisions along political lines. The government's narrative of a foreign-backed conspiracy to destabilize the country gained traction among its supporters. The protests also had a profound impact on Sheikh Hasina's legacy. Once hailed as a champion of democracy and development, she now faced accusations of authoritarianism and human rights abuses. Her image, both domestically and internationally, was tarnished. The events of 2018 marked a turning point in Bangladesh's democratic trajectory. They exposed the fragility of the country's democratic institutions. As international pressure mounted and domestic dissent simmered, Sheikh Hasina faced mounting challenges to her authority. The economy, once a beacon of success, began to show signs of strain. The once united Awami League began to show cracks, with factions vying for power and influence. Rumors of discontent within the military added to the sense of uncertainty and instability. Amidst this backdrop, rumors began to circulate about Hasina's future. Some speculated that she might step down voluntarily. Others believed that she would attempt to cling to power at any cost. The future of Bangladesh hung in the balance, its democratic trajectory uncertain. Sheikh Hasina's long tenure as Prime Minister of Bangladesh presents a complex tapestry of progress and regression. On the one hand, she oversaw remarkable economic growth, lifting millions out of poverty. Her government made significant strides in areas such as education, healthcare, and infrastructure development. On the other hand, her rule was marred by allegations of corruption, authoritarianism, and human rights abuses. Her government's crackdown on dissent and muzzling of the media raised serious concerns about the state of democracy in Bangladesh. Her supporters view her as a strong and decisive leader who guided Bangladesh through a period of remarkable progress. Her critics see her as an authoritarian figure who undermined democratic institutions. Sheikh Hasina's rule was a complex mix of light and shadow. As Bangladesh moves forward, it faces a number of challenges. The country must address the deep political polarization that has taken root in recent years. It must strengthen democratic institutions, ensure respect for human rights, and create a level playing field for all political actors. The international community has an important role to play in supporting Bangladesh's democratic transition. This includes providing financial and technical assistance and promoting good governance. The future of Bangladesh remains uncertain. The country has the potential to become a model of democracy and development in South Asia. However, it will require a commitment from all stakeholders to uphold democratic values and work together to build a more just society.